The Rogue is a class known for their versatility in World of Warcraft, whether it's consistent damage and cleave during the endgame or burst and CC in PvP. The Rogue's extensive toolkit of tricks lend itself well to many areas of content. And when it comes to leveling, this class also does fairly well, albeit they are a bit of a slow starter during those early and most dangerous levels. Either way, today we delve into the depths of this class and check out how the Rogue fares in hardcore WoW. So if you're starting up on hardcore or thinking, what class should I try? Is the Rogue going to be a good pick there? I think it's somewhere in the middle of the pack. There are harder challenges and most definitely easier too. We'll get more into this point later, but when you look at the Rogue's toolkit of Gouge, Cheap Shot, Kidney Shot, Blind, Evasion, Sprint, Vanish, you think to yourself, how does anyone ever even die on this class? And the answer is, it's the early game. Most people die around level 12 to 14 in hardcore WoW. By that level you have Gouge, Evasion and Sprint, which are good, but it's just surprising how fast things can go south when you're playing a class with no built-in self-healing. I think if you've been a long-term Rogue player, you'll have gotten used to the fact that you need to take things a bit slower during the start of the game, whereas later on you can be a little more free to use your cooldowns and keep moving forwards. Also, a quick mention here for some of the class quests. I don't want to totally spoil them if you're going in blind or haven't played a Rogue in a while, but let me just say the Rogue is a class known for not playing fair, and your quests will pull that trick back on you quite a few times over if you fail to follow directions properly. Also, the Poison quest, which you can do as early as level 20, wait till 22 when you have Vanish, believe me. Either way, I'd say the Rogue is relatively new player friendly, but definitely not the easiest 60 to ding in the game. So how does the Rogue perform solo when it comes to leveling and elites? I reckon, again, quite well, though it is somewhat dependent on what talent setup you've decided to go down. Rogues are one of the two classes in the game to possess stealth, and the only class who can enter stealth during combat through Vanish. There are plenty of quests with items at the back of a cave, or where you've cleared to the back of a cave and need to bring back to the entrance again. In fact, this one entrance, one exit makes caves high risk for the majority of classes in the game. Rogues kind of don't have to worry about this as much, and as long as you're careful with your pathing and stealth, you can skip past what other classes can't, or just straight up sprint and get away. Against elites, Rogues can be a little bit variable. Generally, they can absolutely demolish casters and treat their cast times like free damage before landing a CC effect, but struggle more versus pure melee attackers, particularly those with two-handed weapons. In case you didn't know, in Classic, there's this thing called parry haste. When any unit, yourself or an enemy, parries the target, the next swing timer is reduced by 50%. This means when you're chopping away with your dual wield versus some ogre with a big two-hander, you're giving them a lot of chances to parry, therefore speeding up their attacks. It can really catch you off guard, so watch out for that. Though Rogues, despite not having any built-in healing, have perhaps some of the most CC in the game to lock down individual mobs, and you can definitely use that CC effectively to either bandage or wait for energy ticks to re-engage. Another strong tactic versus elites is to have crippling poison running, and to open combat with a garrote into a 5 combo point rupture, and then kite away as they gradually take damage from the dots. What about being part of a group then? Well, if there's a premier choice of melee DPS for dungeons, for me that's got to be the Rogue. This class is really valuable in group-based content. Have you ever wondered how hardcore groups get past the gate in Blackrock Depths that needs the Shadowforge key? A key which you quite literally need to have died in order to accept the quest to get it? The answer is lockpicking. I mean, you can get through with engineering Sephorium charges or blacksmithing skeleton keys too, but Rogues can do it for free. You can get through the first door in Diamond North as well, and if somebody gets a lockbox, hey, you can open that right up for them. If you want to use CC, Rogues have Sap. Big warning for Classic Sap though, it will drop you out of stealth when you use it, so do be aware of that. Rogues can easily lock a dangerous mob out of combat for 10 seconds with a simple cheap shot into Kidney Shot. That's long enough for your group to get through almost any health bar in a dungeon. They have no downtime as they're using energy. This is great if things go wrong or a pull goes on longer than you expect it to. And they're a great source of damage pretty much whatever they spec into on their talent tree. And if things start to go very wrong, well, you can type F in chat, press Vanish, and live to see another day. That is the Rogue way to do things, right? If you're running as a duo, a trio, or whatever type of other group aside from doing dungeons, rogues are also an excellent melee. When their health bar can be propped up via healing and they can get the most out of their slice and dice, this class can really start to tear through multiple enemies no problem. In group content, a rogue fills everything you want from a melee class and is pretty much always a good pickup. Which brings us to survivability. So there's quite a bit to say here, and some of it isn't totally obvious. But we'll go over the basics first. The rogue is an archetype across so many games that is literally known for their ability to weasel themselves out of bad situations through some kind of deception or trickery. So you already know they're not going to disappoint when it comes to survivability. You unlock early ranks of Gouge and Evasion and Sprint before level 10, Poisons as early as level 20, Vanish at 22, Cheap Shot at 26, Kidney Shot at 30 and Blind at 34. These abilities are the things that will keep you alive when things go wrong. They all have varying cooldowns and cost differently according to your talents. Play around them. Pulling 2 mobs with Evasion is very low risk. Pulling 2 mobs without, well, that could go poorly if you get unlucky during the fight. Also, kind of like a hunter, remember to stock up on your items when you're in town. You have to create your own poisons via a class-unique profession. Lockpicking is also treated as a profession, with there being several hubs across the world to level it at. Vanish needs vanishing powder, you can just go buy that off NPCs, and Blind needs blinding powder. This can usually be crafted from 1 Fade Leaf, which need 160 herbalism to gather, and I usually don't cover professions in these videos simply because it feels as though I would be saying just do engineering, mining, or alchemy herb in every single video. Maybe I should do a separate video for professions, so let me know if you want to see that. But for rogues in particular, herbalism is very good, but who knows, maybe we can trade pretty freely on official servers, and this isn't really something you need to think about. On the subject of herbalism, there's another reason you should pick it up. Thistle Tea. This is a reward from one of your class quests, instantly restoring 100 energy on a 5-minute cooldown. This is an incredible item to overcome some of the more challenging quests in the game. The problem is you need a swift thistle to make it, which are found when gathering Mage Royal at 50 herbalism or Briarthorn at 70. So whenever you're taking on a solo challenge or just want to ensure you always have the items with you, the Herb Alch combo is very good on the rogue. Now on to the kind of less obvious stuff. So Distract is usable out of stealth, and you should 100% have it keybinded. You've had that moment where you're fighting something, there's a patrol coming which you can see, and you can't run away because there's other mobs behind you, but you could have distracted the patrol so you have enough time to finish the fight you're doing and then stealth safely away. You can also distract out a single mob that are part of a larger patrol, such as on Lieutenant Fangor in Red Ridge Mountains on the Alliance, or on Anathek the Cruel in STV for the Horde. Distract is a very useful survivability spell, keep it in mind. Next we have to talk stealth. It is rogue's core ability, and the first rank you get of it absolutely sucks. Mobs will see you well before engaging them, especially if approaching from the front, and that's due to how stealth level works. Each stealth level, which funnily enough is a hidden stat, will improve how hard you are to detect. 5 stealth levels are equal to 1 combat level. If your stealth level is well below enemies you're attempting to engage, they're probably going to see you before you can get the jump on them unless you're approaching from behind. For example, here's stealth rank 1. You can see in the spell details the stealth value mod is 5. This means it will be effective against enemies who are level 1 or 2. You get the next rank of stealth at level 20, which as you can see here improves your stealth level by 100, meaning it's now effective versus level 20 enemies. The later ranks come at 40 and 60 and also make stealth effective against those level of enemies. So essentially don't rely totally on stealth at early levels or midway having through learned a newer rank. Oh, and don't forget Safe Fall as a passive is something you learn at level 40, not straight away, so don't go throwing yourself off cliffs thinking you'll be fine. Next is Vanish. So if you played Classic in 2019, you may remember sometimes you vanish and mobs just keep hitting you and you get knocked out of stealth instantly again. It appeared at the time it was down to the 400 MS batching thing Blizzard had going on back then, but it can still happen even on Classic era right now. If a mob's melee swing happens exactly at the right time as you press Vanish, they can still cancel the ability. You always, as much as you possibly can, want to create some distance between yourself and the target when vanishing to mitigate this. Or press the ability just after an attacker's landed, and if you can't do either of those, press the button and hope for the best. Finally, some enemies have true sight, so this means they ignore stealth. Now in later versions of WoW, there's some kind of blue eye icon that hovers over their head to tell you that they have this ability. I feel like in Classic, sometimes I have seen this on mobs when they have true sight, and other times I have not. Maybe I'm just mixing it up between seeing it on different versions of the game, maybe it's been implemented in an inconsistent manner. Either way, there is one type of enemy which very consistently does have true sight, and that is the tracking dog or hyena model. They're found all over the place, but most notably as pets for the Scarlet Crusade, Centaur of the Barons and Desolus, and the Ogres of Diamol in Feralus. So even if you can't see the blue icon over their head, if it's a tracking dog or hyena, just assume they have true sight and don't risk going anywhere near them. Also, speaking of true sight, I wouldn't be surprised if mobs with Sentry or Lookout in their name have some kind of hidden stealth detection modifier, or perhaps even true sight themselves. That's exactly the kind of thing Blizzard would have put on mobs back in vanilla. So moving on, how fast is this class to level? I think Rogue depends quite a bit on experience with the class, and you can definitely say that for every class, can't you? But there have been speed leveling challenges completed on Classic with the Rogue where it's among one of the fastest, but it's often quite a high risk playstyle that gets those results. For hardcore, it's more of a marathon than a sprint, and spending that extra time eating to full health is better than a visit back to your starter zone. Based on that, I'd say Rogue is average speed for the leveling portion of the game. Which brings us on to talents, an area that I think is very interesting for the Rogue, where two rather distinct paths are available. The most common that you will see will be combat, and it's really hard to argue with the effectiveness of this spec. This spec picks up amazing talents such as Riposte, which has a low energy cost, a great damage modifier, and it disarms the target for 6 seconds. Combat gets improved gouge, allowing more time to run if you need to or to wait for energy ticks. Both endurance and improved sprint give you that extra bit of survivability and some counterplay versus roots whilst in combat. Later in the tree, the combination of Blade Flurry and Adrenaline Rush allow you to easily cleave down several mobs at once. Many classes don't even get an offensive cooldown at all, so Rogue's getting 2 is huge. Weapon specialization wise, honestly, it depends whether we can trade in the game. If we can't or it's limited, chances are you may not have a main and an offhand weapon that really justifies speccing into something. Ideally, you would want sword for the extra swing chance, but we can talk more about weapons soon. In fact, it does open up the ability to go more into defensive talents as well, so maybe it's just a play for hardcore either way. But there is another leveling spec you can go down, and something along this line was what I used when leveling my Rogue during vanilla. The reason being is, as effective as combat can be, for me it has 2 problems. One, it just doesn't really rely on stealth all that much, and I kinda like stealth and like upgrading it. And 2, combat generates combo points very slowly, and then spends them mostly on slice and dice, which doesn't see full uptime due to running between mobs. So the alternative is leveling as subtlety, and it is not half bad, you know. The whole idea behind this spec is you open with an almost guaranteed crit from ambush with a dagger, swap to a higher damage main-handed weapon, ghostly strike, spam hemo, and then use combo points on whatever fits, between eviscerate, slice and dice or rupture. Improved ambush and remorseless attacks are what are going to give you that opening crit. Initiative and setup for extra combo point generation, and Hemorrhage will be your alternative to Sinister Strike, which also costs less energy. You get Preparation 2 in this tree to reset all of your cooldowns, meaning your survivability goes up dramatically in this spec, and Premeditation is at the bottom of the tree. It has a 2-minute cooldown for reasons in Classic. Either way, it's an instant 5 combo points alongside an ambush with an initiative proc. Over in the Assassination tree, there's just some generally good DPS improving talents which add extra combo points and improve the effectiveness of your crits. What I will say for this spec is you want both a slow dagger and a main hand weapon to swap to in order to do good damage. Also, it kinda just sucks until level 20. I mean, you don't get ambush to level 18 and stealth rank 2 is 20, and you do need both of these things for it to work well. Before that, you're just gonna be playing scuffed combat. Worth a go though if you get a good dagger. dagger. Against casters, you can remove about 40% of their health in the opening ambush, which I think is a really fun alternative to combat. Ability-wise, you really want to be picking up the majority of the things that rogues have to offer. As per usual here, green means I'll level whenever I get the chance, yellow optional or don't level fully, and red is avoid. Sinister Strike, Backstab and Ambush are spec dependent of course. Kick and Gouge deal very minor damage from being leveled up, and gold-wise aren't the best investment. Feint can be useful in group content, but doesn't feel super mandatory to level. Avoid ability-wise, I don't know when you get use out of expose armor over pretty much any other finishing move in the game. Also I'd skip some poisons. The rule of thumb in Classic is poisons are great utility, not very great damage. For me, instant plus crippling or mind numbing, or just both of the utility poisons would be the way to go. On to weapon progression. As a rogue, we of course care about having good weapons. The biggest concern for whatever you're playing is a slow main-handed weapon. Slow is valuable as many of your attacks instantly deal damage as either a percentage of your weapon's damage, such as on ambush, or a flat extra amount, such as on Sinister Strike. Your offhand is generally a faster weapon used for applying poisons, but can also gain more value when you're combat due to dual wield specialization and any weapon spec you've opted into. Starting off as a general point for rogues, don't underestimate just buying common quality weapons from vendors. The raw stat increase of a higher level weapon will eventually beat out an uncommon weapon, and rare weapons in time too. There are also a ton of one-handed weapons on offer from various quest rewards, more than I could possibly cover here, but I'll go over a few good examples of swords. Early game for Alliance, Daryl's short sword from a Hunter's Challenge is a good main-hander, which can later move over to offhand as you upgrade. And for Horde, the elegant short sword from Serena Bloodfeather in the Barrens is a good starter. There are tons of options in the mid-game, so I want to focus on the ones which are going to be the biggest upgrade for both factions, and both factions need to do dungeon quests here. There's kind of not really options that can match up to how good this weapon combo is. For Alliance, the Sword of Serenity from In the Name of the Light will last you for a very long time. This quest chain starts in Stormwind with Brother Anton and mainly takes place in Desolace. Alongside this, you want to take the quest to Bring the Light, which will award the Vanquisher's Sword. This is just from defeating the last boss of Razorfen Downs. On Horde, there's a similar quest to do in Razorfen Downs for the Vanquisher's Sword. This time it's called Bring the End, and it starts in the Undercity. Horde also has a quest for a full run of these Scarlet Dungeons called Into the Scarlet Monastery, which will award the Sword of Omen. The next upgrade is from Corruption of Earth and Seed, which involves defeating Princess Theradras in Maradon. This will get you your Thrash Blade, which will last you to level cap. Good daggers, however, are a bit harder to come by. For Alliance early game, a fairly easy quest to get done is Red Silk Bandanas in Westfall. This awards the Scrimshank Dagger. For Horde, the quest chain starting with Resting in Pieces, ending with One to Bethor, awards a decent dagger. It is in Silverpine though, and there aren't too many alternatives. You can also get a dagger from the Serena Bloodfeather quest too though. Mid-game, Alliance have the Ceremonial Elven Blade from the quest line in Feralus, starting with Psychometric Reading. And Horde have the final part of the Call to Arms quest line in Arathi from Hammerfall. This is an elite quest, but it gives you a dagger that will last for some time. It should be doable if played carefully. Late game, the big pickup from questing is from the remains of Trey Lightforge, which starts from escorting an NPC out of Shadowhold in Felwood. The only problem from this quest is there is also a sword, which is very good if you haven't been able to find anything in that category. Let's finish up with a few macros and add-ons then. Something unique to the rogue is pickpocketing, and you can macro it into your opener from stealth to get that little extra bit of gold as you level. Keep in mind you do have to loot mobs twice in order to get the pickpocketed gold. For playing sub in particular, I found that macroing my dagger into stealth made things a lot easier. And you always want to start a tank macro regardless of what spec you're playing. It doesn't need the weapon equip if you're playing combat. Also, you'd want to swap Hemo for Sinister Strike. Add-on wise, there isn't a ton I would really specifically need on the rogue. As always, I'm a fan of using some kind of swing timer for judging incoming damage, and rogues of course have tons of CC and ways to interrupt, so using modern target frame and Omni CC will allow you to see the duration of CC effects on targets, as well as the length of time they are interrupted for. And that, I think, is just about the rogue. This class is a little more tricky than it appears to get to 60 at a first glance, with the early levels being deceptively dangerous. Once you start to learn your core abilities though, the Rogue really turns into a powerhouse class in both solo and group content. Overall, if you're looking for a pure melee class in classic hardcore, Rogue is a good mix of accessibility while still offering some level of challenge. Anything else you'd add for this class? Do drop it down below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.